When I was working part-time as a waitress, I saw my boyfriend at someone else's birthday party. Only then did I discover that he was actually the heir of a wealthy family in the Beijing social circle. He had always liked to scold me, believing that roses were just a waste of money. However, at that birthday party that day, he asked for 999 roses to send his blessings to that girl. By chance, that day was also my birthday. I watched everything in silence and chose to turn around and leave. Later, I blocked all forms of contact from him and left that city. But he went crazy. 01 I met Emerson when we were working part-time at the university, in the cafeteria next to the university. At first glance, I noticed his white shirt. With his deep features and pale complexion, he looked exactly like the poor but hardworking and handsome student who works part-time to support himself, like in the novels. After getting to know each other better little by little, we added each other on WeChat. We went to the study hall together to study and worked part-time together. Thanks to Emerson's good looks, everyone at the university knew that there was a poor but handsome student who worked part-time in the cafeteria next to the school. People kept adding him on WeChat. At first, he was fine, but later, he got exasperated and simply introduced me as his girlfriend. She was still a little confused. Just as I was about to deny, I saw the sincere expression in Emerson's dark eyes. Somehow, I didn't clarify and chose to tacitly accept what he said. Later, as expected, he declared his love for me and we went from being boyfriends only in name to being a real couple. After I graduated, we rented a place directly and lived together. He was an orphan and my family was deep in the mountain. We had experienced difficulties, and we both placed great importance on money. Consumption in the big cities was high, and in addition, we, recent university graduates, were cheap labor. On our days off, Emerson and I worked part-time to earn a little extra money and contribute to our small savings for our future marriage. When I got this temporary waitressing job that paid 200 yuan an hour, I was happy for a long time. However, when I saw Emerson, who was supposed to be working overtime in the company, appear at the party, the joyful expression on my face instantly froze. 02 Emerson, who had always been frugal, completely changed his simple appearance in front of me. He put on a black suit and his bangs that used to cover his eyebrows were combed upwards. His winged eyes looked calmly at everyone present, with a hint of disenchantment with the world. It seemed so unattainable. If it weren't for that face, I might not have recognized him. At the party, those children of rich people fought to please him. He just looked at them coldly while those people fawned over him like a god. Seeing that I froze on the spot, Fanny, who was working part-time with me, gave me a push. He asked me with concern what was happening. I shook my head and, looking at Emerson, who was surrounded by people in the distance, I asked in a somewhat gloomy voice, "Who is he?" Fanny took a look and lowered her voice. "I have heard that he is the heir of the Emerson family in the Peking social circle." Looking at the extremely unknown Emerson in the distance, I felt some indescribable emotions welling up in my heart. The boyfriend who had been by my side day and night for 4 years had suddenly gone from being a poor orphan to being the heir of a wealthy family in the Beijing social circle. Subconsciously, I pulled out my phone and texted Emerson. Emerson was sitting there, relaxed, surrounded by a group of people. Suddenly, his phone rang. Everyone looked at him and jokingly asked, "Emerson, who is this?" Emerson picked up his phone, took a quick look at the screen, and then said nonchalantly, "It's nothing, just spam." Hearing this, I felt like I had fallen into an ice cave and my whole body was shaking. So, Chloe, was just a dispensable person in his eyes. That's right. After being together for 4 years, he didn't even know her true identity. Somehow, I felt very sad. All my past efforts seemed to have been in vain. I just looked at the lively scene in the distance without saying a word. Next to Emerson was a woman dressed as a princess. She had a haughty expression on her face. With her pale complexion, she looked like a princess coming out of an ivory tower. Fanny pushed the 5-layer cake that had been prepared in the kitchen for 5 hours. The cake was covered with fruits and you could smell the sweet, greasy aroma of the cream from afar. People began to give him gifts one after another. Emerson was the last. With a gesture of his hand, he had 999 roses sent. The woman was so moved that she covered her mouth with her hand. The children of rich people who were next to them were cheering. I and a few others were dressed in the prepared doll costumes and were standing awkwardly with the roses in our hands. My eyes felt a little dry, but I couldn't cry. I couldn't even describe how I felt at that moment. Through the disguise, I looked at Emerson, as if I were seeing him for the first time. 03 On the first Valentine's Day when we had just started dating, when we were shopping and saw the roses on the sidewalk, I insisted him buy me some. Emerson refused. Once he made up his mind, no matter how flirtatious I was or how much I insisted, he wouldn't change his mind. What did he say back then? He said, "Roses cannot symbolize love. They are just the packaging of the market, which manipulates the girls. Roses are not romance but a waste of money." Seeing that he wasn't willing to buy me flowers, I got a little angry. Even though what he said was correct, I still wanted a bouquet of roses from my boyfriend. Before I could storm off home, Emerson grabbed a dogtail weed from the park lawn and made me a simple ring. I was so moved back then that I even regretted my stubbornness. Now, looking at the scene before me, I just thought it was so ridiculous back then. He never thought that buying roses was a waste of money. Maybe buying roses for me was the real waste of money in their eyes. 04. The party was very lively, but it wasn't mine. I just watched them in silence until the party was over. I received my salary and turned around to leave. It was almost dawn when I returned to the rented apartment. Emerson had not returned. I collapsed tiredly on the couch. Today was also my birthday. Originally, I had planned to use the money I earned from part-time work to buy myself a cake and a small gift after finishing work. Maybe I was distracted on the way back. I didn't do many things on the way and just went straight home. I looked at the decoration and layout in front of me. We had been accumulating them little by little during the years we lived together. We had even agreed that when we had enough money in the future, we would buy this apartment. So, I had been working very hard to save money. Even though today was my birthday, when I saw the part-time job that paid 200 yuan per hour, I still applied. That's right. What else could I do if I didn't show up? If I didn't show up, I wouldn't have seen the truth. Could I keep lying to myself? I hugged myself and sat on the couch. I don't know how much time passed when I heard the sound of the door opening. Emerson returned. He took off the discreet and luxurious suit he had worn at the party and put on his usual white shirt. Once again, he changed from being the wealthy heir in the luxurious social circle to an ordinary office worker. I looked at him without saying a word. Emerson changed his clothes and walked straight over to hug me. I freed myself from his embrace and, looking at his slightly tired eyebrows, asked, "Why didn't you reply to my message?" Emerson's expression froze for a moment and then returned to normal. "Honey, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. You don't know how busy I was with overtime today." He had a complaining expression on his face. If I hadn't seen with my own eyes that he was the center of attention at that party, I would have been fooled by his acting skills. "So do you remember?" My voice was a little hoarse as I slowly said, "Today is my birthday." Originally, I thought he was really working overtime. I thought maybe he would surprise me after work. We've been together for 4 years. It has accompanied me on my birthday for the first 3 years. Now it seems that he has simply forgotten. Maybe he got tired of it. He forgot his real girlfriend's birthday and went to celebrate someone else's birthday. With a gesture of his hand, he sent 999 roses that he had never given me. I felt a little choked and wanted to cry, but I held it back. Obviously, Emerson had forgotten. He frowned and apologized to me, and promised to compensate me with the gift tomorrow. I ignored it. He thought she was just angry because she didn't get a gift. He made some token attempts to comfort me and then went to sleep. I watched him silently without making a sound, watching his face as he slept. That face that I had described countless times suddenly seemed extremely unfamiliar to me. In the past, we also fought and broke up, but it was only out of anger. This time it was different. "Emerson, this time, I really don't love you anymore." 05 I submitted my resignation letter to the company. Without telling Emerson, I booked a ticket to City Z. When I left, I looked around the city. That was the dream I had after meeting Emerson. Back then, when I was young and naive, I thought I could spend my entire life with Emerson and hoped we could have a home in this great city. In fact, from beginning to end, it was just my own beautiful dream. Now, the dream has awakened. I threw my suitcase and turned around to get on the bus. On the bus, I looked at Emerson's profile picture and somehow sent him a message. Then, I blocked all forms of contact from him. "Emerson, the game of pretending to be poor is over. 06 Reality is not a movie. No one will be down for 2 or 3 years because of a failed relationship, including me." Time moved on. I adjusted my mindset and started sending out resumes again to look for a job. Since I wasn't a recent graduate, in this day and age where college students were everywhere, as a bachelor's graduate, I didn't have much of a competitive advantage. I sent out resumes like crazy. I had interviews, I sent out resumes, I had interviews, over and over again. Fortunately, during the years I was with Emerson, in order to have a home, I had saved a lot of money. Being temporarily unemployed wouldn't make my life difficult. With all that hard work day and night, I didn't have much time to think about Emerson. Soon, I joined a company and really stabilized myself. Every day, it was just between the company and the rented apartment. She lived a quiet life alone. When I naively thought that the world was so big and that after leaving that city, there would be no chance for Emerson and I to meet again, maybe God was planning a ridiculous comedy. When I was in an interview, I saw Emerson again. And he was sitting in the new manager's office chair. Having gone a few months without seeing him, he had returned to his identity as an heir. Dressed in a custom-made suit, he looked exactly like he did that night. In fact, he had never been the supposed poor boy named Emerson. I looked at the newly appointed manager who had suddenly arrived and just pretended that I didn't know Emerson. I delivered the documents to him in a professional manner. Just as I was about to leave his office, my hand was grabbed tightly. I followed those hands and watched. It was Emerson. He had no expression on his face, but he just pulled me forward. I tried to break free from his grip. Due to the great difference in strength, I was wise enough to give up the fight. 07 There was no one else in the office. Emerson stopped in front of me. Although his face showed no expression, I could sense that he was very angry. Because? Emerson's dark eyes looked at me, full of anger. I looked at him without responding. It was like an act of resignation, or rather, desperation. Emerson leaned toward me, looking at me like I was an angry cat. Stop being difficult, okay? It's my fault. Stop being difficult? With a single sentence, he attributed everything to my exaggeration. I was so angry that I started laughing. Who would dare to blame the young lord of the Emerson family? Hearing this, Emerson, who was about to extend his hand, froze, and then his hand rested on my head, as if he were going to comfort a cat. His tone was very calm. Is it just because of this? Don't be angry, okay? Let's go to dinner. Coincidentally, he overlooked this matter. There wasn't even an explanation or an apology. And your roses? I looked at him stubbornly, trying to get a response from him. His face remained serene. She's just my childhood friend. Sending 999 roses on her birthday and telling me she's just your childhood friend? Emerson explained, that day was his birthday. Throughout this confrontation, Emerson was as calm as a spectator from beginning to end. My nose got a little sour when I heard this. Emerson, do you remember that during the years we were together, you never sent me roses on my birthday or Valentine's Day? Over the years, I had manipulated myself with Emerson's words and subconsciously told myself that I didn't like roses. However, who doesn't like their love to give them flowers on holidays or important occasions? Do you like roses? I'll send them here immediately. I looked at Emerson's serious face. Even at this moment, Emerson didn't know what his mistake was. Emerson, maybe I was wrong all along. You don't love me. I broke free of his hand and pushed the door to leave. The moment I touched the door handle, Emerson's voice came from behind. Chloe, my patience has limits. I have already explained to you. What else do you want me to do? I opened the door. If you dare to leave this room, I will not comfort you anymore. This between us is over. Emerson was warning me, using this relationship to threaten me. Manager Emerson, I have delivered the goods. I'm sorry, but I still have work to do. Without hesitation, I turned around and left. Why didn't I see clearly back then? Obviously, many times, Emerson had clearly demonstrated that he did not love me. During arguments over the years, I was always the first to give in. Perhaps this preference made Emerson so fearless. This is the first time Emerson hasn't given in to me. Maybe he can't believe I embarrassed him like this. He even thought that, like before, I loved him and couldn't leave him. He used all of this to force me into submission. In fact, Emerson, you are wrong. 08 I worked in silence at my position. However, it seemed that misfortunes never come alone. My previously harmonious colleagues began to target me. Projects kept coming back and had to be redesigned. Every day after work, they would single me out and ask me to stay. When colleagues were chatting and saw me, they fell silent. He knew that all of this was deliberately done by Emerson. After being with him for 4 years, she knew his character better. He seems cold and indifferent on the surface, but in reality, he is extremely vengeful. It's just that the means I used to use with others are now used with me. In the afternoon, as usual, they let me work overtime. In the huge office, I was left alone. When I'm alone, I always like to let my thoughts travel. With a sense of nostalgia, I remembered what Emerson was like when we first met. Maybe it was because of the novelty. Emerson was very gentlemanly at first. When we first got together, our favorite thing to do was go on dates at the library every day. Emerson would explain the assignment to me over and over again. Occasionally, when I would stare at him in a trance, Emerson would notice and just tap my head with his pen, and then, with reddened ears, he would tell me to concentrate on listening. Maybe it was the novelty, or maybe at a certain point, Emerson really loved me. However, at this point, I don't want to delve into it anymore. The lie is the lie. No matter how it is wrapped in lies, its essence cannot change. 09 Probably due to the high intensity of overtime these days, I sat unenthusiastically in front of the computer. Before finishing the work in hand, Department Manager Lou called me to his office for the usual scolding. They were just harmless words. I looked at the fierce expression of the bald middle-aged man in front of me and suddenly remembered how subservient he was in front of Emerson. I just thought it was funny. He knew clearly that all of this was just to please Emerson. The fat on Manager Lou's face moved vigorously. He pointed his finger at me and shouted insults at me. Before I could react with my head lowered, a cup of hot coffee was poured onto my head. The hair that I had combed neatly before leaving in the morning was now covered in thick coffee. The scalding coffee flowed through my hair onto my cheeks and clothes. I was in a terribly embarrassed state. The door behind me opened and Emerson walked in just then and saw me in this embarrassed state. The girl from the birthday party followed behind him. My head, face, and clothes were all covered in coffee, and I immediately felt a sense of shame. Emerson glanced at me, then looked over me and shifted his gaze to Manager Liu. Manager Liu, who was arrogant before, stood up from his chair and bowed and scratched himself to greet Emerson. Emerson kindly pointed to the girl behind him to sit down, and then talked to Manager Liu about some business matters. Job. I stood there quietly, as if there were only 3 people in this office. The girl didn't seem to know who I was. She looked at me with a sweet smile, and then took a pack of tissues from her purse and offered them to me. I froze on the spot and chose to reach out and take them. After Emerson finished speaking with Manager Liu, he looked at me, with a hint of warning in his tone. If you don't want to work and don't have the ability to do the job, then quit and leave. At that moment, I felt extremely suffocated. He clearly knew that all of this was at his direction and that Manager Liu was trying to please him. Probably because I was too offended, tears filled my eyes. Perhaps for reasons of pride, I tried hard to control myself and not let the tears fall. After leaving the office, my emotions gradually stabilized. That hot cup of coffee woke me up. I was going to resign. The resignation process was quick. The next day, I packed my things at my workplace and left the company. Probably because I had given up twice in less than half a year, I decided to take a break, take a vacation, and adjust properly. Just when I was escaping reality, eating huoguo and shopping with my friends, Emerson appeared. He looked gloomy. When he saw the people next to me, his face immediately cooled and he asked me, "Who is he?" At that moment, my friend returned just to pick up the things she had left at the huoguo restaurant. I was waiting with Nathaniel, my friend's younger brother who had come to help us load things. Emerson's haughty and questioning tone was extremely uncomfortable. I did not answer his question, but instead chose to twist. "What does who he is have to do with you? Chloe, what the hell are you still being difficult about?" Emerson still had that arrogant posture. "I'm sorry, but I don't think she wants to talk to you anymore." Nathaniel, my friend's younger brother, stood in front of me. He was tall and thin, and he didn't give a damn when he stood in front of Emerson, who is 6 feet 8 inches tall. Emerson looked at the young man in front of him, and the veins in his temples pulsed incessantly. He had a cold face. "I am your boss. I don't think you have the right to stop me from talking to her." "Emerson, I've already signed off. You are not my superior, and I don't want to talk to you either." I broke his illusion. Emerson went crazy. His eyes were bloodshot, like an angry lion. "Chloe, I haven't approved your resignation. You are still an employee of the company." Nathaniel laughed. Looking at the helpless and furious man before him, he said, "Mr. Emerson, I think perhaps you are illiterate and know nothing about the law." It was like a mockery, or rather, sarcasm. As soon as Nathaniel finished speaking, Emerson's fist came straight at him. He couldn't react in time. Nathaniel just tilted his head, and the fist grazed his side face. Obviously, Emerson had used all his strength in that punch, and inevitably, it still left a red mark on his face. After Nathaniel reacted, like a 20-year-old young man with a temper, his first reaction was to quarrel, but then he thought of the person behind him. He held back his anger and covered his face with his hands. Seeing this scene, I walked forward and examined Nathaniel's side face. "Nathaniel, are you okay? How is your face?" Nathaniel covered his face. When he looked at me, his eyes were red, as if he had been bullied. Seeing that he was fine, I remembered that today my friend had asked her younger brother, who is studying at the university in City Z, to accompany me shopping for my sake, but now he was hurt because of me. The feeling of guilt in my heart welled up. When I looked at Emerson, I couldn't help but feel a little resentful. "Emerson, I think there is nothing left to talk about between us. We separated a long time ago. From now on, we go our own ways. If you bother me again in the future, I will call the police and accuse you of harassment." Emerson's jaw dropped as he saw what was happening in front of him. He glared at Nathaniel and even wanted to step over Nathaniel and grab me directly by the hand. However, Nathaniel was quick and did not let him succeed. Seeing this, Emerson knew that he was at a disadvantage and had no choice but to soften his tone. "Chloe, can we sit down and talk seriously about our things?" At this moment, Emerson did not have his usual arrogance. He looked at me expectantly. I just looked away and calmly replied, "There is nothing to talk about between us." After saying that, I took Nathaniel and left. Emerson just stood there decadently, his eyes fixed on the 2 people leaving, and his hanging hands clenched tightly into fists. 11 After that incident, to thank Nathaniel, I said I would treat him to dinner. Nathaniel accepted without problems. Just as she was inviting him to dinner, Emerson appeared again like a lingering ghost. I looked at Emerson at the door, who was in disarray. The disheveled hair on his forehead dripped rainwater that spilled downwards. He looked like he had been abandoned, with a complaining expression on his face and a hurt look in his eyes. "Chloe, I know I was wrong. I was too angry before. I was angry because you left without saying goodbye, so I acted that way. Even now, Emerson was still making excuses for himself. I didn't listen to his so-called explanation and only warned him, Emerson, I don't want to hear your so-called explanation. Now we have nothing to do with each other. I told you last time that if you appeared in front of me again, I would call the police. So, do you decide to leave on your own or should I ask you to leave? Emerson seemed to want to say something else. Sister, are you finished? The meat is already cooked. Nathaniel appeared. When he saw Emerson, there was just the right amount of surprise on his face. Nathaniel's hair, which is usually neatly combed, was a little messy at the moment, as if he had just gotten out of bed. He was quite clever, but I didn't choose to find out. Obviously, Emerson didn't expect Nathaniel to be there. He glared at him and asked loudly, why is he here? Nathaniel's tone was full of doubt, and he said very bluntly, if I'm not with sister, should it be you, the ex-boyfriend, whoever is here? The 3 words ex-boyfriend were deliberately emphasized, and Emerson's face suddenly became ugly. Especially when he saw it like this, he was clearly wrong. Chloe, you said earlier that you loved me. Emerson had always been arrogant and in control in this relationship. This was the first time that the development of things was out of his control. Emerson's words sounded really ridiculous in my ears. From the beginning, he was the one who deceived me, the one who was superficial, and the one who deliberately made people torture me. Now he had become the victim instead. How could it be so pretty? I looked at Nathaniel. Seeing this, Nathaniel was smart enough to pretend that he had something to do and left. Perhaps out of concern, he left a sentence, sister, call me if you need anything. Now it was just Emerson and I left there. When Emerson saw Nathaniel leaving, he thought there was hope, and there was a spark of expectation in his eyes. But before he could open his mouth, I interrupted him first. Emerson, don't you think you are so despicable? When you asked me, have you ever reflected on yourself? Have you ever thought about your own problems? Since we met at the beginning, you hid the truth and deceived me. After the truth was discovered, you let it go with a casual sentence and did not give any explanation. I would like to ask, actually, what is your so-called love for me? Emerson was about to open his mouth to defend himself when I questioned him. I didn't give him a chance and chose to continue. Emerson, when you come back to me now, do you think your love is so great that it can surely move me to change my mind? Do you think that I will still revolve around you like before and that I can't live without you? That's funny, Emerson. I will tell you clearly now. There is no chance for us anymore. Since we met again and you let the lie of the years pass with just one sentence, we can no longer go back. Emerson grabbed my shoulders and looked at me with red eyes. Chloe, listen while I explain. I love you. Just what? I looked at him coldly in his disorder and desperation. You just don't love me and you only thought about having fun with me? Admit it, Emerson. You don't love me. You only love yourself. The reason you are trying to keep me again now is only because you are not willing to let go. Like a cat whose tail has been stepped on, Emerson grew impatient. He tried to show me his so-called love and used a lot of useless words to defend himself. I didn't want to get involved with him anymore. I just asked him to leave here quickly. Then, without waiting for him to say anything, I closed the door directly and went back inside the room. 12 Lola was my roommate in high school and college. He witnessed my relationship with Emerson from college to when we entered into partnership. When he saw me arrive, he said with shining eyes, "How are you doing?" I was a little confused and returned to my seat. What do you mean? Lola continued asking, about you and Emerson? We have separated. What else could it be? Perhaps because I had clearly seen Emerson's true face, I did not feel as heavy about parting as before. It was like dropping a heavy burden and I felt relieved. Lola looked a little emotional when she heard this. Have you really broken up? You're not going to be tender-hearted and agree to go back to him, are you? I looked at her with suspicious eyes and in a way I understood. After all, after being with Emerson before, every day I was either with Emerson or working part-time. Every time we separated, I was the one who would ask us to get back together. Lola even joked sentimentally, saying that I was a fool in love. I used a serious tone to assure Lola that this time I had really broken up with Emerson and that there would be no more entanglements in the future. Lola was surprised at first. Probably because she was too excited, she looked at me excitedly, her eyes fixed on me like a bad wolf staring at a white rabbit. Serious. I felt a little uneasy when he looked at me like that. I grabbed the meat on the plate. What bad idea do you have? Lola looked a little embarrassed and said with a guilty expression, Chizzy, what do you think of my Nathaniel? I glanced at Nathaniel who was next to me. He was lowering his head to put meatballs in the broth in the pot and casually picked up the cooked meat and put it on Lola and me's plates. You could say he was very virtuous. He is handsome, ambitious and knows how to take care of people. He is a really charming young man. I said these descriptions sincerely. Hearing my evaluation, Lola's tone was a little cautious. Well, Chizzy, why don't we? I reacted immediately and quickly interrupted her. Seeing Nathaniel, who had been sitting next to us earlier, enter the kitchen, I sighed in relief. What are you talking nonsense? Lola looked at me with a smile. Isn't it that I saw that you were hurt by love and wanted to help you heal the wound? Nathaniel is perfect. He is 1.87 meters tall, has never been in a relationship, is rich but simple at heart, and is good at taking care of people. I quickly stopped him. Stop it. He and I are not compatible. Plus, he's too young. I'm not interested in younger guys. Seeing that she was so determined, Lola gave up. Okay, oh, what a pity that the boy has had a secret affection for you all these years. I was surprised to hear this and spit out a mouthful of water. He? Have you felt a secret affection for you? Yeah. Otherwise, when we were in high school, why did he come pick me up every day? It was just to see you. I looked at Nathaniel coming out of the kitchen and signaled for Lola to stop talking. Let's leave this matter aside. 13 After eating the hot pot, Lola and her brother helped me clean up the mess. Then Lola and I started our girl talk mode. Nathaniel sat quietly on the corner of the sofa, playing with his mobile phone. In the afternoon, probably because Lola and I hadn't gotten together for a long time, Lola stayed the night to continue chatting with me, and Nathaniel returned to his bedroom alone. Lola went to take a bath, and I symbolically said goodbye to her as she left. After Nathaniel came out, I was about to say goodbye and then close the door and go back to my room when Nathaniel extended his long arms to close the door. He leaned against the door with one hand, like a wall, and trapped me in the gap between him and the door. The 1.87-meter young man leaned down and his clear eyes looked at me. The young man, who was usually sunny and handsome, was extremely aggressive at this moment. Sister, I'm not a child anymore. I'm already an adult. After saying this, Nathaniel's ears turned red and his eyes were full of seriousness and stubbornness. I remembered what Lola said, that boy has had a secret affection for you for many years. Looking at the serious person in front of me, I felt a little puzzled. I didn't know how to respond. I admit that for a moment I loved it. Before I could say anything, Nathaniel, afraid of hearing a direct refusal, straightened up, said, "See you tomorrow," and then hurried away. 14 After saying those almost confessional words that night, Nathaniel seemed to have opened his heart. Every day, he began to deliberately or inadvertently initiate conversation topics and create casual encounters. I looked at Nathaniel, who was following me again. He couldn't remember how many times it had been this month. I rubbed my eardrums and looked at him, well behaved, and said, "Don't you have classes? Why do you follow me every day?" Nathaniel innocently opened his clear eyes, as if he was complaining. "Sister, don't you know? It's already summer vacation." I hit my forehead. It must be because I had been working in society for a long time, working 9 to 5 every day except holidays and weekends, which made me forget that students have winter and summer vacations. After all, he was my friend's younger brother, who I had watched growing up since high school. I didn't say a direct no, but rather tactfully suggested that as a college student like him, he should do more meaningful things during summer vacation to make his vacation more colorful. The subtext was to stop following me. Perhaps because of the pain of my previous relationship, I had no intention of starting a new relationship at the time. Relationship withdrawal symptoms don't go away overnight. Also, as my good friend's younger brother and also a brother I had known since high school, I didn't want to hurt Nathaniel. However, Nathaniel seemed to not understand the hidden meaning and simply pretended to ignore it. I talked about this matter with Lola, thinking that as her sister, she should have a way to handle it. Unexpectedly, Lola didn't care at all and even started gossiping about Nathaniel and me. 15 When schools across the country started in September, just when I thought Nathaniel would finally stop bothering me after returning to school, Nathaniel rented a room across from mine. I opened the door and saw Nathaniel across the hall. He greeted me with a smile on his face. "Sister, what a coincidence." I was like, is this really a coincidence? In fact, Nathaniel was like a clingy person that I couldn't get rid of. I even clearly expressed my rejection of him when I couldn't stand him anymore. However, Nathaniel was like a cockroach that couldn't be killed. Every time I became impatient, he would take a step back considerately. After a while, it would slowly approach again. This cycle kept repeating itself, and I felt so hopeless in this situation. However, the only good thing was that after Nathaniel moved across the street from my house, there was an extra chef and I could take advantage of his meals. My cooking skills really weren't hello good. He couldn't say that the food he cooked was delicious. It was only edible. Emerson was also a novice in the kitchen, so most of the time, we just made do. I seriously suspect that Nathaniel has learned to cook at some training institution. Every time she swore she wouldn't take advantage of meals at Nathaniel's house, when she smelled the aroma of food coming from next door, she couldn't help but run to her place. 16 inches This type of neighborly relationship in which I took advantage of meals, my relationship with Nathaniel became closer day by day. As time passed, the relationship with Emerson was like a wound that slowly healed and then healed. He even rarely thought about those past events. I resubmitted my resumes, found a new company, and lived my life well. After I started working, Nathaniel would wait for me every day when I left work and gradually even pick me up from work. At first, I told him not to come, but he insisted. In this way, our relationship remained beyond friendship but less than a romantic relationship. Nathaniel didn't clarify. In addition to being kind to me, he was afraid of putting pressure on me and did not declare his love for me. Until one day, on my way back from work, I ran into some drunk hooligans. When Nathaniel arrived and saw the scene where I was being harassed, he walked straight over and punched the hooligans several times. Finally, the matter was resolved after mediation by the police station. There were scars on Nathaniel's face from the fight with the hooligans. I was applying medicine to his wounds. Nathaniel was looking at me carefully. Just as I pulled my hand away, Nathaniel grabbed my hand and declared his love seriously and softly. He said he was afraid of what would happen if he didn't protect me well. I admit I was moved, so I accepted. Nathaniel hugged me and continued laughing like a foolish son of a rich landowner. 17 I saw Emerson again at a class reunion. He, who used to always pay attention to his image, now looked extremely decadent. At the class reunion, he sat alone on the sofa, drinking heavily, completely losing his former enthusiasm. I heard from my college classmates that Emerson's family business was in decline, but Emerson was so discouraged that his family was planning to train a new heir. After the class meeting ended, I was waiting at the door for Nathaniel to pick me up. Emerson, smelling of alcohol, approached me. Just as he was about to say something, Nathaniel's car arrived. Emerson froze on the spot and looked at me sadly. "Are you with him?" I climbed into the passenger seat of Nathaniel's car and looked at Emerson, who was standing on the side of the road. I told him with a tone as if I were talking to a mutual friend, "Emerson, the past is the past. What must be released must be released. I wish you happiness in the future." Nathaniel helped me fasten the seat belt and directly started the car. In the rearview mirror of the car, I saw Emerson covering his face and crouching desperately, crying with regret like a child. Unfortunately, there is no medicine for regret in this world.